Ah, nice big crowd. Awesome. Can we, before we do anything else, put our hands together for Anna and Katie and John and all the creatives. This is a tour de force, is it not? So in its true definition. So my name is Carrie Nath. I have the pleasure of being the Director of Equitable Access at BLUEBARN, where we believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. Yes. And I've got three amazing guests that are giving us part of their time and their knowledge tonight. And I said this before with AfterWords, this is meant to be a conversation, but we have some based on what these organizations do, and we'll find out about that in just a moment. Digging in a little deeper to some of the issues from the play tonight, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions and conversation, right? So it may not be a question you have, but something you want to share as well, and that's cool too. Everything's cool at BLUEBARN. So first I would just love, if you want to introduce yourself, starting with Mindy, and then a little bit about your organization and what it does would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, everyone. My name is Mindy Rush Chipman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of ACLU of Nebraska. And the ACLU of Nebraska has been around for about 60 years. It's our 60th anniversary next year. And we work to protect and advance the human rights, and civil liberties of all Nebraskans. When I was in law school, I thought of the ACLU simply as a really powerful law firm, but what I'm realizing now, particularly when we're in the midst of a democratic backslide, is it's not just litigation that's going to help us move forward, but it's really something we like to call integrated advocacy, which is using all the tools to effectuate sustainable change. So we litigate, but it's not just filing a lawsuit, it's filing a lawsuit on an impact case that if we win, it's going to change the lives of our clients and their families, and also more Nebraskans. We're going to change that underlying policy. And in addition to litigation, we do lobbying and advocacy, and then we do community education and engagement and activation. And so using all of those tools, again, we work to protect the rights of us all and make Nebraska freer and fairer for everyone.
And we thank you. Paul.
Yeah, I'm Paul McGreal. I teach constitutional law. I've done that for about 30 years, the last 10 years at Creighton University, where I currently work. And one of the things that's been sort of wonderful as I've gotten to know the university community, both at the law school and the larger university, is to see the service learning and service for justice. For example, law school has multiple clinics that provides legal representation for those who cannot afford it, because our legal system, as much as the door is open, it's often open only to the extent you can afford to walk through it. And so at the law school, I'm very proud that in addition to the clinics, we have externships, we have other service learning pro bono opportunities. And throughout the university, there's also a number of different service learning organizations that continue to make contributions to the community. And I want to extend my appreciation and thanks for the opportunity to be here, because as my family will tell you, when it comes to the Constitution, I just won't shut up.
We're going to be here all night. It'll be good. Okay.
We have lawyers charged by the hour. So.
Thank you so much. And Brad, who also is stepping in to help us out. You may have seen that Meg was listed in the program. Meg had a family emergency this evening, and Brad just walked right up, and he's stepping right into the role. So can we give an extra round of applause?
I'm Brad Christian-Sallis. I'm Chief Power Officer at the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table. Really, a lot of what the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table does is support a ton of nonprofits in our community, like the ACLU, in doing work of civic engagement and getting folks involved, especially in grassroots activity, and getting folks up to the legislature and doing everything we can to support all the nonprofits that are in our community that are really strong and really connected to their communities, making sure they have the tools, the expertise to really do that advocacy and engage the folks they work with.
Awesome, thank you so much. kind of laugh when I was writing through because we're going to dig deeper into this play. We also want to have conversation with you all, and all of that in less than 30 minutes, right? So I put a framework to it, and then I had to laugh because it's like setting up the debate in tonight's show. So this is how this is going to roll. We've got one question for each one of these fine folks. They've got 3 to 5 minutes to speak to that question. Because we are all passionate, once we get to the 4-minute mark, if I hold up my finger, that means you're at a minute. I'm not trying to cut anyone off, and we certainly can continue, but want to make sure that the audience has time to get involved as well. So I think that's probably all we need to know, except that I should get my timer, because I am the worst. I would stay here all night because I would love to just have a sleepover, a constitutional sleepover. So we're going to start first with Mindy Rush Chipman from ACLU, and the question is, Mindy, playwright Heidi Schreck focuses on 4 generations of women and the way in which the Constitution does or does not protect their lives. There are a number of examples where the Constitution does not protect them. And looking at your webpage, 2 of the 4 most current stories are about immigrant women released from ICE custody recently and being reunited with their families. How did the Constitution work in their favor?
That's a great question.
Or did it, I should say.
Right. So what Carrie is referring to is the legal team at the ACLU of Nebraska, supported by a comms team, supported by our policy team, using that integrated advocacy, were able to help some Nebraskans be released from immigration, customs, and enforcement detention recently. Before I came to the ACLU, I had practiced immigration law for many years. And the way it has worked for almost 30 years is when you are placed in immigration detention, you have the right to ask to be released on bond. There's basically 2 criteria that an immigration judge will then use to evaluate whether or not you can be released on bond, is whether you're a flight risk or a risk of being a danger to the community. So Maria, Aurelia, also Sabina, and Bartola, a lot of our clients were detained by ICE, but never charged with any crimes. Never charged, not let alone convicted. They were never charged with any crimes. They woke up and went to work one morning, and they never came home. And so we stepped in to help them assert their right to be released on bond while their immigration case proceeds through the court. And as many of you know, immigration cases take sometimes years and years and years to come to fruition. So some ways the Constitution did not protect Maria and Sabina and Aurelia is the influence of the political system of the United States actually caused them to be unsafe in their home countries. They're from Central and South American countries. And they fled to the United States to save their lives because they were afraid of persecution in their home countries and they couldn't survive. And these women have lived in the United States for 10, 20, almost 30 years, one of them. And they have contributed to the community, they have jobs, they have families. Sabina, in fact, has 5 U.S. citizen children, one serving in the military active duty right now. Anyways, so our Constitution actually created a less safe experience for them in their home countries. And then when they came to the United States, the Constitution did not provide them an opportunity to ask for really a realistic form of immigration relief in the United States. And so these women did what they had to do to survive and provide for their family, which was work. And like I mentioned earlier, that's what caused them to be detained by ICE. The Constitution did not protect these women from being disappeared for 3 days after they were detained by ICE. They were kept in a basement of 1717 Avenue H, our local immigration office, immigration court, for nearly 3 days without access to showers, feminine hygiene products, medication. They were not allowed to talk to their attorneys, and some of them were not allowed to talk to their family members. when we were ready to file suit based upon lack of access to counsel, our clients as well as their coworkers who were all picked up when they were working at their shift at Glen Valley, were moved to Lincoln County Correctional Facility, which is about 4 hours away in North Platte, Nebraska. The Constitution did not protect them from being moved 4 hours away from their family, their attorneys, their support system, everything that they would have needed in order to provide for their defense and the support of their families. But what I can say is the Constitution did help us facilitate habeas corpus litigation because what we were able to do is get an immigration judge to issue a bond determination for our clients. And so another thing we were able to do is fundraise as a community, so that way when our clients didn't have access to pay the outrageous bond amounts that they were ordered to pay, when I say outrageous, $25,000, like, I don't know about you, but that's not something that I could pay. But the community came through, we were able to post the bonds, and then I still did not release our clients. And so we had to go in front of a federal court judge outside of the immigration context and basically say that there was no legal basis for our clients to remain detained 4 hours away from their family without many of their basic needs being met. And we won. They were released. They were reunited with their family. I mean, just, seeing them being reunited with their family that they had been, separated from for 3 months was very emotional. But something worse is that the arguments that we made to win and secure their release are being kind of undermined in other courts. And so what that tells me is, like, the Constitution and our legal system gave us an opportunity to secure a step forward, but we're facing 2 steps backwards. And so, like, it's kind of like that whack-a-mole game where, you hit the mole and you think you've won, and then the mole. So like, our clients are with their families right now, but we cannot guarantee that they're not going to be picked up again. So, it's back and forth. So it's, I can't wait for Paul to talk, because I've lost a little faith. So let's have him, help us.
So first, I want to say thank you for what you're doing. Thank you. And when we open up any of this, we can continue to converse these 3 questions. So hold in mind the things you want to ask or what we want to know more about as well. So thank you. Paul, your question. In the play, we hear the justices discussing the word shall, and the determination that shall does not mean must as pertains to actions, e.g., the police shall enforce a restraining order. The resulting ruling then became known as the death of the 14th Amendment. Can you speak to the power of words in constitutional law and how we as citizens can protect ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the very beginning, I have the good fortune of teaching law students when they might not think it's the good fortune, but when they just arrive at law school. So they're coming in, they're eager, etc. And one of the things that we do talk about is, the way language matters. And truly, one of the very first things we look at in different contexts is shall versus may. That's foundation. Discretionary, may. Mandatory, shall. And that's kind of bedrock. And then Justice Scalia, who's mentioned in the play, said that he was a textualist. But the interesting thing is, if you look at his career, and I've always thought of him as sort of an intellectual bully, although there are times I'd probably drop the word intellectual, maybe rhetorical bully, would be conveniently use that textualism. And so I tell my students is that when something doesn't look right, there's something behind it. There's a reason you go in the other direction. When it's clear that shall means must, shall means shall, to say otherwise and then to use other words, to rationalize it, there must be something behind that. And I'll give you an example. In another case that involved the Virginia Military Institute, they had for their entire history only admitted men. In a case U.S. versus Virginia, where the majority opinion was written by Justice Ginsburg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, held that was unconstitutional. In his dissent, Scalia said that the majority was being irrational, that it was inappropriately judging our forebears and their prejudice toward women. That while on the one hand they may look to be prejudiced from today's viewpoint, the fact is that that is our tradition. And I think that's what he believed. And so when that was the bedrock that he rested other decisions on. So when he said shall means may, it allowed him to leverage that tradition that did not protect women, that had a misogynistic view of women. And that's what I believe was sort of underlying that. And then in terms of, again, this idea of positive rights, one of the things I think is a tremendous misunderstanding about the Equal Protection Clause, that no state shall deny to any person within their jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws, is that it's all about equal treatment. And there is that, and that's important. But one thing that's getting lost in history was that the very people who wrote that amendment knew that the recently freed enslaved persons, that when they would be murdered, their murderer would not be tried. A choice was made by the government who to prosecute. And if you murdered certain people, they wouldn't prosecute you. When it came to enforcing contracts, when a formerly enslaved person would bring a lawsuit to enforce a contract, it would not be enforced. The law was not equally protecting them. In other words, if you're going to prosecute some people or prosecute the murders of some people, you need to prosecute the murders of all the people. And that is a positive right. And I think we've lost that. I think we've lost that notion.
And that, in a way, I mean, if I'm making this connection correctly, could be a link back to what's happening here as well. No protections in that, not seen as equal, right? Not seen as equal. So more to come. I know, I can feel the questions. So thank you. And Brad, with Nebraska Civic Table, the play is, in and of itself, an act of advocacy and resistance through the writer's voice. Your second core value at Nebraska Civic Table is to make sure that voices can be and are heard. And you focus on voices from around the state. Can you speak to how you do this, how Nebraska Civic Table does this for Nebraskans?
Yeah, I would say the way the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table does this is that through our members and ourselves, our power building team, we work to give folks the tools to make their own voice heard. Fundamentally, I don't know that we can do it for anyone, but we can give folks the tools and the techniques on how to be effective in advocating for themselves, how to lift up their voice, how to lift up the voice of others through their advocacy, whether it's, you know, some things that are real simple, like showing people and walking them through making their first call and doing their first little bit of phone banking, whether it's connecting them to one of our member nonprofits that works on issues they're passionate about. And, you know, a simple way is just doing some of those basics, like reminding folks it's election day or when the voter registration deadline is. There's a lot of small actions that really make the difference in people's voices being heard, but I just always think the biggest is that folks believe their voice not only can be heard, but should be heard. That's always something to overcome, is that apathy. So working on that and making sure folks know, like, your voice can be heard, but it should be heard. Here's the tools on how you do that. Here's the people you need to connect with to have more information so you can be just an educated, informed voter.
Awesome. Thank you. You mentioned voting, and I missed one of my notes, and I am so sorry about that. Our League of Women Voters folks were here prior with these folks in the lobby. Will you stand up or wave or something so that we can recognize you? Doing the job every day of making sure people know they have the right to vote, they can get registered to vote, and making that happen anywhere. So thank you. Thank you so, so much for joining us tonight too. Really appreciate it. Now, we'll open this up for questions, but it was interesting, Mindy, you're like, I can't wait to hear from Paul because I want to know what is going on with our Constitution. So we can cross-reference questions too, if you've got them, right? But want to make sure we get to some of our audience as well. So what do you have? Thoughts, questions, things you'd like to contribute? Or is your brain just reeling it's astounding the amount of information. I saw, okay. Here, and then I'll go to the hand in the back, okay?
You got it.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead, you
I'll
got the
take
floor.
a stab at it. The Constitution. Basically, when you come down to it, they're words. You can either obey those words or you can ignore them. It's not some magical barrier. It was, the Obama administration where Senator Grassley said, we're not going to let Obama nominate the next justice. His purpose was to get the conservative power into the Supreme Court. It didn't matter politically, well, not politically. It was a cheap political trick. And nowadays, Congress, Supreme Court, they don't give a fuck about the Constitution. It's words. So you can keep the new one, or rather you can make a new one, you can keep the old one. It doesn't really matter as long as there are people who ignore it.
So the feeling is that, and I think, I'll just speak for myself because I'm not going to speak for other people. There is this sense of hopelessness sometimes that these tools are here and we're not using them. They're not being respected in the way, they're not being utilized in the way that they were intended to be used or to be reflected upon. And that's what I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I'm hearing, right? So from that, how do we regain our trust? Maybe this is a question we can throw to this panel. How do we regain that trust in the Constitution? Because I think that feeling is kind of pervasive. We don't know what or who to trust right now. So do you have any thoughts on that, any of you, or?
Well, I'll start, and then I really want to hear what Paul and Brett have to say. But I think that kind of goes back to what the ACLU is pivoting towards in this moment. Some of the sentiment of what I heard you expressing. And it is clear that we are not going to win this moment in litigation in the courts or in with our lawmaking bodies. It is really going to be in movement building. It's going to be in us stopping the othering, and be more united and use all of our tools in tandem simultaneously to, like I said before, stop the backslide and then rebuild in a stronger way. So that way we are not in the future saying the Constitution doesn't fucking matter because it's just words, because we've done the work to rebuild in a more sustainable and effective way.
Yeah, two quick things come to mind. One is, I was listening to a podcast a couple of years ago, and there was a Canadian commentator who was talking to an American constitutional law professor. He said, you Americans, you puzzle me. Your Constitution was a catastrophic failure. It led to a war in which more of your people died than any other conflict. And what did you do? You kept it. You didn't just redo it, you just slapped 3 Band-Aids on it and moved on like nothing had happened. That made an impression on me because at the same time I was reading another book that talked about the history of during Ulysses S. Grant's presidency, during the Reconstruction Amendments, when they were desperately trying to enforce the Reconstruction statutes and amendments in the South, because people were being murdered when they tried to vote. If you were Republican, you'd be murdered in broad daylight and no one would be prosecuted. Or if you were, the local jury would acquit you. Formerly enslaved persons, murdered in broad daylight, lynched, etc. And at some point, the great Ulysses S. Grant, and again, great in some ways, was despondent. I mean, he was saying to people, I don't know what we can do. This is a lawless part of our country. And so, and I'm not sort of looking at that for solace as much as saying that we've been in places like that, where the document is making literally no difference, none whatsoever. And so maybe that longer historical period lets me think, yeah, there's an element, not an element, there are days I feel hopeless and think, why do I go to teach this document anymore? Because the norms that have guided its interpretation application seem to have eroded. But then I think that may be too short a time frame. Even to the point where I tell my son, you know, the Supreme Court now, from my perspective, is lost, probably for the rest of my life. But that doesn't mean it, looking at the expanse of history, because we talked about different eras. And I'm like, I'm living in part of what probably 100 years from now will be called some sort of era that we look back on with shame. I don't believe I'll live to see the end of it, but I do have a faith that if people continue to do the good work, just like they kept trying to go down federal officials into the South during Reconstruction, they kept trying to do it, that we will, as a people, work through this. I wish there were a better answer, but that's what gives me hope.
Brad, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I think I love both of y'all answers, Mindy. So what you said with movement building, for me, one of the things I try and keep in mind is just how much can change so drastically, and how quickly it can happen. Like, I mean, I even think back to COVID in 2020 and how I haven't worked in office consistently since then. Things can change overnight, and I think a lot of these things that feel like will go on forever could go on forever, or we could stop them. I think we all have that power, and we do have the tools, even to the idea of like the Constitution and like how it fits in our modern day and age. There's the tools in the Constitution to amend the Constitution. We haven't necessarily all come together and said, hey, maybe this is something we should look at, but like there are various different things that can let people get that hope back. I think part of it is really learning about what our government is and does, and participating actively in it in the different ways you can, whether that's city council, school boards, and just, it doesn't have to be running for office, just going and listening. You know, a big part of where I think a lot of folks feel frustration is to the accountability piece, because the Constitution, like, supposed to hold all of us accountable, but also the government accountable. But in order to hold someone accountable, like, we gotta do our parts of it. So I think it can like feel like some of this stuff is said or the Constitution doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't have to be that way. We just have to make the active choices and take action in a way that will reverse some of those problems we're seeing with it.
Thank you.
And if I may, Carrie, and I also don't want to forget about the Nebraska Constitution, which Brad and I and many of us in this room have participated in direct democracy efforts to make our Nebraska Constitution more representative and, you know, protect our rights. And that we still have that. We have that ability. At the ACLU, we call these state and local efforts firewall acts. So while there's fuckery going on at the national level, we can do more things at the state and the local level to protect ourselves and our loved ones and our communities. And I think that when you are feeling the moment of hopelessness, like we all do on a regular basis, I think looking to those local actions that we can do and we are well resourced to do is something that gives me hope.
And I think that, you know, what someone may want to try to convince you is that your voice has no power and your voice does not matter, and it does. It does. And all the voices matter and are necessary. So, and I think that's a big part of a lot of the propaganda to try to convince us that there's nothing we can do and it just doesn't matter anymore, but your voice matters. It's a powerful, powerful thing. I want to come, there was a hand.
I don't know if like a full-on question. It's more of like a couple of thoughts. I've been thinking about like just the undermining of citizenship. Who basically this idea of who gets to decide who gets to live here, and basically like what they're doing in Illinois right now, like handcuffing children, and just like also like the executive order around designating Antifa a terrorist organization when Antifa is not an organization. It's used as like basically a blanket way to prosecute whoever they want. So like a lot of like there's a lot of removal in this administration. They want to remove things. They want to delete. I'm an archivist in profession, so they want to try and remove and delete things from like their website, but like that's not how websites work. And like, or they want to delete reports on like domestic violence, terrorism on the right, and they want to make it seem like it's all coming from the left. So just like these different, aside from laws, which they're clearly like bending and just ignoring, they're also sort of doing, even like with the Smithsonian, where they're going in and saying, you know, these are the things that we want to remove. We don't think these are American things, or this isn't telling the story of America in the way we want it to be told. So like a sanitization that's happening. I guess that's just sort of where I'm leaning right now and thinking about things, and I'm just trying to like wrap my head around like as an activist or as someone who thinks of themselves as an activist, where do we move? Like I feel like they're trying to kind of close in the walls, right? Like there's people that are trying to put their bodies on the line and are getting shot by ICE agents and like already, and like, and there's, you know, they're all wearing fucking masks, like they're in the Gestapo. Like, what do we do with that? Like, what do you do with that as like someone who wants to be active, wants to get in on like protests? I mean, you saw it in George Floyd, you saw it in the Palestine protests. You see, you know, people who are videotaping people in protests and, you know, whisking them away to dark rooms as well. Like, there's danger to be, you know, on the streets or to be active, even on social media now, because they're, you know, the Trump administration is trying to target those people. Like, so what do you all think about like ways to engage? I mean, I'm not saying I don't want to put my body on the line. What I'm saying though is like there is an inherent risk in all of this for all of us at all levels. Whether we want, you sit on the sidelines, you still get attacked eventually, you know. So what do y'all think about that? That's a lot.
How to balance risk with action, and how do we take care of ourselves and still make our voices heard and move forward?
Or like our neighbors who are being fucking taken away.
And how do we protect each other? You know?
The first thing I would go to is that risk will always be there, and it's never going to go away. We look throughout all of history, like, if you care about something and you want to stand for it, like, there's a risk to your safety. That will be there. I think there are ways to engage in movement and to support community. That's not that. That's a very specific action. But like, there's also folks who need food, and you can go take them a can of food. There's so many activities that can be done without someone needing to be the person at the protest and in the front of the protest, and even logistically to setting up a protest. There's tons of things. You can be the person who went to Costco and got all the water so no one gets dehydrated. So I would not just think about it in this active out front role, but think about all the different roles and ways you can be supporting people in your community. Maybe it's, you know, someone because of what's going on and someone in their family's been taken, maybe they haven't had a chance to just cut their grass. Like, you know, what community can be built and what support and how like needed is that to like help that person out if they don't have to like worry about cutting their grass that week. There's just so many ways we can support people and we can be actively engaged. And when you're doing that, when you're doing things like cutting folks' grass, then you're also having a conversation, you're building those relationships. There's so much more that will lead to long-term power building in that community just off that kind action. So I would just not think it has to be upfront.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you so much for the briefing. I have a couple of thoughts. One, and I think it's brilliant what you do, by the way, archiving and storytelling. My training is in restorative justice. I do talking circles, engagement circles. And one of the most special things about that is you tell your story. You get to share your narrative, hear other narratives, learn the wisdom of a shared wisdom, understand what you have in common, the values at the center, but your own experience may be very unique. It is able to hold grief and pain, it's able to hold the both and. I think it's important to grieve. I personally think, and this is why I hold them online, that when there's grief going on, it's valid and important, and also it can fog your glasses of what's really going on. And that you need a place, a safe enough place, because everything is a risk. Even in circle, it's a risk to share. You don't know exactly how you'll feel after, or how others, you're not sure how they take you, and they're not supposed to tell you how they take you because they're letting you talk uninterrupted. But we need places to have grief, and we don't know how to grieve. Most of us are not rooted, except in general, not always, in general, those that are in marginalized communities, oppressed communities, often either come from collectivist cultures or have developed their own culture. And collectivist cultures do a pretty good job of holding the community, of inviting to acknowledge what is your individual need. But your individual freedom shouldn't be at the expense of the collective need, but neither the other way around. So what do you need of the group, and what can you give to the group, and what do you need to maintain as your individual dignity? I think all of those things we establish and we talk about. And I think stories and telling the truth. I'm also a writer, and I love to write, I'm an official writer, but through writing is a way to do justice. Because if I keep telling the truth out there, that's, even if it's the same truth I said yesterday, I feel like it's like working with young kids. You gotta keep saying the same thing, holding the same boundaries. I think those two questions are really important. How do we build empathy in community and culture? Through storytelling, maybe, through archiving the truth. How do we also hold accountability and empathy? Where are they intention? Where are they compliment? I think it's really helpful to understand, and especially, and it's just a personal thing, for me as a white woman, I try to listen to those on the margins and listen to what are they saying the needs are locally. What do they need? What is the systemic work I could be a part of? What do I need to help? What are other people on the journey with me? And I think it's so, and then the final thing I'm gonna share is in terms of what do we do with the truth? Or what do we do when things feel really shifty, really hard? We need to grow capacities of resilience and pivot. What does it mean to pivot? What does it mean to turn and go this direction, go that direction? We need to be able to pivot in how we see ourselves, be able to ask uncomfortable questions, sit with uncomfortable truths, listen to stories, and find a way to keep archiving and keep the truth out there. I agree, I hate to say it, but I, likely am not going to see a great Supreme Court before I pass on. like Paul shared. But I hope my daughter might. And so I think kids, I think what we tell our kids and inviting our kids to be really engaging and active and thinking and holding truth and telling stories, learning how to tell your story.
Yep, I think so. Speaking that voice, telling your story, sharing those commonalities we have and helping each other out with the things that we also may not share, right? And getting to know each other more. Thank you very much for sharing that. We have time probably for one more. I see a hand waving back here. One more question, and then we're going to wrap up.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I just want to say that was probably the sweetest and kindest word of fuckery that I've ever heard. You said it in the sweetest way possible. And that was
Yeah,
really
it's my new
lovely.
favorite word.
Yeah, it's yeah, but it was just so beautiful, you said. I just want to ask, and maybe this might be a nice closing question, but I'm thinking about messaging. So as we just came off of this beautiful play about the Constitution, and with all the messages that we are being bombarded by through various forms of media and people and whatnot, I think I would like to know from each of you, why does the Constitution matter? I think that's what sometimes gets in the way when people are interpreting it, or they're using it, they're weaponizing it, or they're standing on it. It's in this day and age, and how do we message to people if we want to stand on our truth, as these people were saying, as that gentleman said, why do we give a fuck? All these things, how do we message out why this matters?
And this might be a great way for a final question to say, I think that kind of rounds us up. What does matter? Why does it matter? And where do we go? If I could add to that too, where do we go with that message? Anybody want to take it first?
Not a lawyer.
Yeah. So I'd say one of the most chilling things I've heard within the last month is speeches that were given by the vice president and a couple of other people about what it is to be American. Because one of the things that I remember growing, I'm a child of first generation Americans. My grandparents, born elsewhere, came over to the United States. And I remember my father telling me at one point, again, when we talked about that history, that one of the things that makes anyone American is their belief in certain values and ideals, things that they hold and cherish. And so I never even thought twice about that until I heard this speech when the vice president said, that's not what makes you an American. There are certain people who came over to found this country of a certain character, and it's that character, that commonality, that common bond, not an ideology, that is what makes someone American, and we need to reclaim that. And it simultaneously made the hair stand up on the back of my neck and made me angry. I mean, I was pissed when I heard that. How dare you? Because I can tell you, I'm sure just about everyone that wasn't on the Mayflower at some point was told, you don't belong here. And we're continuing it, we're just replaying that over and over again, that othering of people. And so I guess one of the things I try to stick to is this notion of inclusivity, that all of good faith who are here are welcome and need to be valued, and to just really call out that BS when you hear it. In fact, it was during I still remember during one of the rallies coming up to the election, the phrase that was said, America is for Americans. And again, chilling. Because you start to make that decision who is and who isn't, that's where you get into who the Constitution protects and who it doesn't. And that's the thing that I think is evil and corrosive. And so whenever conversation, other things that I'm a part of, to make sure that I try to bring that spirit to it. But that's, I'll tell you, that is the thing that really, in the current discussion, angers and frustrates me the most. And again, there's a whole lot of things that are on that list too.
Yeah.
It's just at the top of a long list.
And knowing this is our wrapping up too, maybe come to Brad and then Mindy will close with you, if that's okay?
Yeah, I don't know if I can say anything better than that, other than that, like, fundamentally, it's a lot of people in this country, we're gonna have to have some laws, like, and I do think if the Constitution isn't working for us, like, then there's avenues to change it and update it. But like the idea that like we're not gonna be living under some set of laws that's never gonna happen. So like, it's gonna have to matter because it's always gonna be there. So how are we making sure it reflects what people today feel, what people today want, what we want, that it's representative of us? This is a representative government. Like, it's our document where we do get to then define like who is a person and who is not. And you know, I think about the Constitution, I think like I was always a person, but my ancestors, who are also always people, didn't have the rights of a person. So like having that piece of paper, having things we can refer to and say, it really doesn't matter one person's feeling on this. We came together and decided Black people are people. Like, that's why it matters to me. I think even back to just how much we've seen things change in our state constitutions. These things matter in like really practical ways, like that I just don't think we can underestimate. Like, even if it doesn't feel like it matters, we're all here in this room today, so we know it matters. And it's affecting us. That's why y'all are sitting here listening to people talk about democracy. So, yeah.
Yeah. Woo. Thank you. Mindy.
So I would a gift that I want to give is to plug our annual meeting. It's on November 8th in Kearney, Nebraska, but we have a whole day of what we're calling popular education, but really what it is a way for us to answer our own individual questions about what can I do right now that matters. Because what Brad said is so true. It takes us all at all different levels, and it's not a sprint, it's a relay race, you know, where we're all gonna ebb and flow. And when I'm low, Brad's gonna help me pick myself back up and vice versa. And I really think that the Constitution is a baseline. It was never been perfect. We can all agree on that. I remember when I was in law school, a huge debate with one of my professors about could I actually become president because I was born through cesarean. I was a natural childbirth. So I was a natural born, you know. And so like these words are constantly going to be susceptible to strong interpretation for that person or segment to get what they want. Like that's always been the case, it's the case right now. But what we are going to need to move past it is the movement building and the solidarity, and I think storytelling, for me personally, is where like the secret sauce is. So in this advocacy training we're doing on November 8th, we're going to learn how to share our stories in different ways that we're safe to do, and that with message tested language, and it's going to give us some tools to be able to not feel so helpless and hopeless. I think storytelling fucking works, and I'm going to leave you with one like example, because when we're talking about abortion rights, which I think this production does a great way of like talking about abortion to break stigma, but I didn't talk about my abortion for 25 years, just like Heidi. But when we were working on the abortion rights ballot initiative, which we almost won, we lost 49 to 51, but we almost won. That's a big deal in Nebraska where nobody says the word abortion. But I live in a rural county. Everyone voted for Trump, very conservative, very like church going. We don't talk about abortion. I knocked every single door in my precinct and I talked about abortion from a personal experience and how, you know, I don't want my daughters to have less rights than I had when I were their age, and all the things I never thought I could ever tell anyone if I wanted to be a lawyer, right? And if I wanted to win cases, like I could never talk about my dad's incarceration, my brother's death by suicide, my abortion, like no. But when you do it, when you become a little bit more vulnerable and you talk about things, even if you're not perfect, like I don't know how to talk about abortion yet, but I do it, and you know what? We won. Liberty Precinct passed the abortion rights ballot initiative in our precinct when I thought we had no chance of passing it. So and I am not trained. I don't know how to like message. I don't know, I'm not political, but I know the power of sharing our own stories and sharing what we believe in. And so I think that's what we need to get us through the challenges, the constitutional crisis that we're currently in. We need like solidarity, storytelling, movement building.
Yep. I cannot thank the three of you enough for what you do and for being here to share this time with us. For League of Women Voters as well, everything remains so important. And for all of you, sharing what you know, sharing what you're passionate about, asking your questions, staying around to have the conversation. The big conversation the question at the top was, what can I do? Sometimes I'm just so overwhelmed. What can I do? There's been some great opportunities here to get involved. Great websites that you can call with lots of tools, right? These are people you can contact to find other ways to engage. And also, we record these panels as long as we have permission, which we do for this evening. And so this conversation will be available through the recording. We put it in our socials. So share it with other people who couldn't be here tonight. And then they can learn and pick up the resources too, right? It's how we care for one another. So again, thank you so very much to all of you. And I hope you leave feeling a little more empowered tonight. So thank you again for coming.